The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
Michelle, have you ever had a secret that has been eating you up inside that you are just struggling to talk about? And if so, is now the time?
Yeah, geez. Way to start. So provocative. Yeah, of course I've had secrets in my life.
Let's hear it.
Confessionals. What was that show? True Confessions? No. Yeah, no. I mean, I'm blanking right now because I'm on the spot.
No worries.
How about you? Is there anything coming to mind for you?
Oh, of course. I think everyone has secrets.
Yeah.
Probably would keep to our graves, maybe.
Well, it's also, I wonder the flavor of the secret too, because is it a secret that like you're keeping to yourself because of guilt and shame, or because you're protecting someone, or because you think you'll be judged? I mean, there's a lot of reasons to keep a secret.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is with today's guest, we can actually answer some of these questions. And she wrote a book about she had an affair with an older man and how that affected her and how she's bounced back.
I'm excited to talk to her about even the decision to put this big part of her life out there, knowing that it's a complicated scenario where often people have judgment. And so learning about her story and what happened and where she is now, looking back on all of that and what her hope is in writing this book, I'm excited to hear about.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And I'm Michelle.
Welcome to Unrelated with Kel and Michelle.
I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 2 decades.
And I'm the show producer and co-host.
Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships,
why we do what we do,
and what causes people to unrelate.
Joining us today is Alicia Barr. She is the author of More Than a Secret, How a Mistress Broke Free from Her Affair. Welcome, Alicia, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're really excited. It's one of those times when something sparks you. And that's part of why we do this show, is because people can relate to these things and not always get talked about. So having someone like you who's putting it out there so that it can be more communal of a conversation instead of so isolating. I'm excited to talk about that.
I appreciate that. I like to say, like, what lives in the dark grows in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And so until we're willing to shine a light on it and talk about it, like, how do we expect anything to change, right? So thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah.
And by the way, we love Alicia's background right now. Could you describe it for our listeners?
Yeah, so this was a 10-stall boarding facility for horses, and a few years ago, I converted it into a real estate office. So this is where we're recording all of our podcasts and doing all of our work now. So a lot of fun. I'm an outdoors person, so I hate being in the office. I hate doing computer paperwork, but that's a necessary evil of business, right? So this is a little less invasive for me to be in an old horse barn versus 4 white walls.
Absolutely. It feels like if just outside of your square, there's horses running around, frolicking in the fields. That's how it feels. That's what I'm picturing
100%.
anyway.
Yep. Yeah. I'm looking out at some cornfields, bean fields, and yeah, there's a horse outside. So.
Yeah.
Speaking of, Alicia, where are you at right now?
So I'm in the Midwest. Yeah. So born and raised here. This is all I've ever known. And you guys were just sharing that you're out in LA. And I'm like, I can't even imagine. I can't imagine that adjustment having come from the Midwest.
Yeah, same. I mean, we're both from the Midwest, and it's the piece of your identity that is Midwestern. I think when you're from the Midwest, you absolutely understand what that means.
Right.
It's in our genes, Michelle. Well, speaking of where you're located and where you're from, let's learn more about you, Alicia, because you have a fascinating story, and we want to do a deep dive. But tell us more about you and your journey.
I like to tell people this, I guess, piggybacking on that, is that I was raised right on God, Garth, and straight. But unfortunately, I haven't always lived right. So I think that sums it up right there in one sentence, right? That's who I'm from. It's what I believe. It's what I've known my whole life. But unfortunately, having not always lived right, about a decade ago, I fell into a 4-year affair with a man that was 30 years older than me. And the first 2 years, I've committed to tell the truth. And so this book is nothing but the truth. But the first 2 years were the most fun and incredible years of my life. He took me to the moon, showed me all the stars. And 2 years in, though, I hit rock bottom because no human is made to be a secret. No human's made to be number two. So after being belittled, degraded, and ditched more than I care to even acknowledge, not because he was a bad person, not because he was a mean person, because of the position I put myself in as number two, as the mistress. But after being belittled, degraded, and ditched so much, I hit rock bottom, literally wanting nothing more than to die. Because even though I knew right from wrong, I was raised with strong values and a foundation of faith, there was no desirable solution. I didn't want to lose the man that held my whole world in his hands any more than I wanted to be a secret for the rest of my life. And it was like, no matter which direction I went or considered, the future looked so dark and so bleak. I wasn't selfish enough to commit suicide because I'd always felt like it was the most selfish thing a person could do. Unfortunately, growing up, I had seen some people do that, and I saw the confusion and the pain that it caused not only their friends and family, but their community. And I'm like, it's not right for, I made this choice to enter into this. Like, it's not right to make everyone else pay the price for me to take the easy way out, right? But that didn't mean that when I hit rock bottom, trust me, I was begging God to take me in my sleep, take me in an accident, don't hurt anybody else, just wanting nothing more than to die. And it's by the grace of God I'm still alive. Unfortunately, the affair continued for another 2 years, just trying to wrestle that out, figure out how to break free from the toxicity. And I was at a women's business conference in COVID. They were still having a live event, so I was so excited to go here in the Midwest. And a gal by the name of Annie F. Downs was on stage. There were 1,200 women in the room at this church, and it was a business conference, right? Like, I was going for business. That's where my head was. That's where my headspace was. And she's on stage, and she's talking about social media. Like, I wasn't familiar with Annie at the time, and she was talking about social media. So I was kind of checked out because I wasn't on social media at all. I always just kind of hated it. Felt like it was the highlight reel of everybody's life, but not real. Yeah. And so I was kind of checked out, just kind of browsing through my notebook. And she says, don't have secrets. But I kind of glance up, glance down. Okay. And then she stops her entire speech presentation and says, no, right now, there's someone in this room that needs to hear me say, don't have secrets in real life. I'm not talking about social media. And of course, like, my head's down and I'm like, I feel like there's probably 2,400 eyes looking at me. So I gradually raise my head and look up. And of course, there's nobody looking at me. But for me, that was like, okay, God, I heard you loud and clear. Like, through Annie F. Downs today, like, this is over. And again, committed to tell the truth. I went back to the Opryland Hotel that night and just drank myself drunk. Like, it was too much. It's too much weight. And I just wanted nothing more than numb out. But as we know, or as many of us know, you wake up the next morning and right back to reality. And it was like, no, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, that was the call out. And this has to be, I don't have a choice. Like, I wanted to be free again, but I never had the courage to do it. But now I had to do it. There was no option at this point. And so that was the end of the physical affair. But unfortunately, we lived in very close proximity. And so, the closest analogy I can come up with is it would be like a recovering alcoholic choosing to live next to a bar. It was brutal. And so I was determined to hold on to the neighborly relationship, friendship with a death grip, and so even though I had ended the physical affair, it was this, being caught between longing and loss and just trying to salvage anything we could, not wanting to lose my person entirely, being willing to give up this sexual affair, but not wanting to lose him entirely until eventually things came to a head and they ended up moving. But but I really found a counselor when I came back from that conference, and I'll never forget it. She was just like, you're too wonderful to be his secret. You're too wonderful to be anyone's secret. And she really just laid the groundwork, laid the foundation for me and she would tell me the only way beyond grief is through it. Like, you have to navigate and face this pain head on to work through this. And so I saw her for about 1.5 years, sometimes twice, 2-3 times a week. It was crazy. And she retired, and I felt like I was probably standing on my own 2 feet again. And about 6 months later, it was like an 18-wheeler hit me. And so by that point, I was back in church, had a couple gals over, and I was like, guys, I need help again. I don't know. It was like, hello, grief. I didn't know at the time, but this grief is a beast. And
it's going to come back.
Like, okay, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just hits you, right? And so that's when they introduced me to Rachel Long, the founder of Joshua Center, which is a grief counseling center. They specialize in kids, but thank God they don't turn adults away. And she just continued to build up on that foundation that first counselor had set. And it was like, what you don't work out, you will act out. And first counselor was right. Like, the only way beyond grief is through it. And my favorite definition of grief, guys, is that grief is the gap between what we thought would be and what really is. I think growing up, not at the fault of anyone. I just paralleled grief with death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I never paralleled grief with all these other losses that we all know all too well through life, whether it's the loss of a relationship or the loss of a connection, the loss of, a work or a job opportunity, like whatever it is, a physical ability. But grief is that gap. And sometimes we just need somebody to help us walk through the gap. And so Rachel did that flawlessly. She came with so much grace, so much mercy, so much understanding and patience. And God knows she had to have the patience with me, because it was like I was determined to hold on, and there was ultimately no holding on, and she knew that, but I had to get that myself, and I think that's the big thing. It's just finding someone that has the capacity to walk it out with you.
Also tolerating the fact or understanding the concept of grief and loss, like you said, is not just about death. It's about losing something that I like the parallel you made with addiction, because, it's very human to still want a thing that's not good for you. And you don't have to go all the way to addiction to feel that. I think every human has felt that. Like, this is something that I know is not good for me, and yet I want it anyway, and I can't let it go.
Yeah.
That's so universal.
Yeah. And I think this is brings to light that, I think you can be addicted to another person too.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think I think, addicts will definitely parallel with my story or be able to relate on some levels because of the addiction. Yeah.
And the idea that you said you hit rock bottom kind of halfway through the relationship. So you still spent another 2 years. So someone could, on a practical level say, like, well, why would you be miserable for 2 more years? But, that misery is a part of the love and addiction. You can't separate those things.
It's the comfortable toxic,
Mm-hmm,
right?
Exactly.
It's the whole choosing a known hell over an unknown heaven because it's comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's familiar, right?
Yeah.
And that's very much where I was. I knew it was toxic, and I knew it was destroying both of us from the inside out. But there were still those good moments, and so it's like, okay, it's balance of the scales. And it took someone else really calling me out to get me to break it off.
Yeah. And you use the word mistress, so I'm going to use that word too.
Sure.
So I think one of the reasons you said you wrote the book is to have someone, you couldn't find the resource for yourself in the moment to talk about this sort of thing. But you said don't settle for secrecy as the price of being loved.
Yeah.
And that's something I feel like a mistress out there who's struggling really needs to hear.
Absolutely. I didn't include that part as I was sharing my story, but when I hit rock bottom, I went searching for anyone to relate to, not as a victim. Like, I take full ownership of what I did, and I want your listeners to hear that too. Like, I don't want anyone to perceive me as a victim. When I hit rock bottom, I went searching for someone just to relate to, someone that had been in my shoes, to draw inspiration and hope from. Like, how did she not only break free from the toxicity of this relationship, but how did she ever learn to thrive again and not just survive, not just live in survival mode? And I couldn't find it. He always told me this was something we were going to take to our graves. And this was be mindful that this is somebody I cared about. This was somebody I had fallen in love with. Like, this is not somebody I didn't want to breach his confidence by going out and telling anyone. Only he and I were the only two in the world that knew. And so I was searching in confidence. A book, a podcast, like anything. And I couldn't find it. Mm-hmm. I could find books from the abandoned spouse, painting the mistress out to be the villain, rightfully so. But nobody was telling my story. Nobody was showing me the way out. And so, fast forward, years into therapy, and just, about 3 years ago now, I really started feeling this nudge that there was going to be purpose in the pain, and feeling called to serve the woman I used to be. And that came in the form of writing my story and sharing it with the world, so that, and my hope and prayer is that this will be the resource that I couldn't find when I needed it most. Because I tell people all the time, and it's fun until it's not. If you had handed me this book in those first 2 years, I'd be like, thanks, but no thanks. I'm having the time of my life, right? But it's fun until it's not. And eventually it's going to take a toll, mentally, emotionally, and likely even physically. And when it takes that toll, you're going to go looking, and you're going to go searching. And I'm just humbled and honored to blaze the trail and just put a resource out there for that person. And when they're ready, it's there.
I'd love to back up a little bit, Alicia, because this is part of the story that I was really fascinated about when I was reading about your bio. But how long were you married prior to meeting this person? What was that like? What was your marriage like prior to that?
Sure. So we were together a total of 11 years. We were married for 8 before we divorced. I met this gentleman about a year before the divorce was actually final. Doesn't excuse it at all. We were basically living separate lives at that point. Doesn't make it right at all. I just to give your listener the context here.
Yeah.
I think I was, you guys are from the Midwest. And so in the Midwest, small town USA, what do? You graduate high school, you either go to college or you get married, you buy a property, maybe have kids, maybe not. You know what I mean? And you just live the American dream. And I've always been like a type A go-getter. It's like, I was just in a hurry to live the American dream. And so the first guy that came along, in college that was like, hey, I think I can make this work. I think I can fix this, this, and this. It's just like I jumped into that. And as y'all are laughing because that's not the case, right? We can only fix ourselves. And so the marriage counselor, fast forward toward the end of that marriage, the marriage counselor was like, he met with him individually, met with me individually, met with us collectively. And when he met collectively, he was like, I think I've got this figured out. And I was like, what's that? And he's like, y'all make great roommates. And I'm like, 100%. Like, we do.
Yeah.
Like, he cooks occasionally, like, helps with the yard. You know what I mean? Like, we don't ever fight. We never fought. I think there was just no love. There was no, I don't think I even knew what love was, and frankly, like, I have no ill will toward him. I have no bitterness toward him, my ex-husband, that is. Or neither one of them for that matter. But I've never shed a tear over the loss of that relationship. From the time we decided we were going to divorce to the divorce, like, I've never shed a tear. But this guy that I had the affair with, oh my gosh, like, it nearly killed me. It nearly killed me to let go. I got I wanted to die before. Death seemed more appealing than letting go. And so it was just a drastic difference.
Yeah. No, Alicia, what you went through is very common. I think a lot of people, in terms of meeting your this person in college or out of high school, then you decide to settle down, and then you wait 10 years later, like, you're like, well, maybe we're just not a good match. But it happens all the time, I think. And it's happened to my friends. And so certainly you thought you were doing the right thing. Clearly you were buying the property, you were checking all your boxes that felt right to you. But then obviously you met this person and just turned your world upside down. Clearly.
No, and with my ex-husband, we did 3 years of like premarital counseling, and people are like, that's how this world, but there was a lot.
That's my favorite thing.
I feel like I made a mistake when I said I do instead of I don't, and I don't say that like abrasively at all. It's just like I was young and naive and in a hurry to live the American dream. And
and you're in a world where that's what's expected. That's kind of the culture. So it makes sense. I'm curious though, as you were young at that point, but you talked about therapy helping you see you deserve better. You said your therapist said you're wonderful, you deserve better. Is that something you knew before the affair and it kind of broke you down and you had to rebuild that idea? Or was that new information to you, this like self-worth and empowerment?
It's a great question, Michelle. I've always been a very confident person, a lot, no shortage of self-esteem or self-confidence. I did not grow up with female empathy. And so I learned all this through therapy, obviously, right? So like nobody will ever be harder on me than me. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody says as a result of releasing this book. Like, nobody will ever be harder on me than me. And Rachel Long, the founder of Joshua Center, my second counselor, and I'd go into counseling and she would be feeling like I was saying things like, okay, here's a common thing you guys have probably heard from the Midwest. She made her bed, she gets to lay in it. Have y'all ever?
Oh yeah. I say it all the time.
Or she got too big for her britches.
Yeah, right. And so she would be like, but somebody has to show you how to make the bed again. Like, you've never lived this, And she really helped me. She really, and it's a growth area for me because I still have to go back to this. She really turned the table on me when she would feel like I was being too hard on myself. She would say, that's what Jesus went to the cross for, Alicia. Like, that's, like, this is... You're forgiven, you're free. Like, you don't have to keep beating yourself up. She would also, this one really got me, is like, I have nieces and nephews. I don't have any children of my own, and I love them more than anything in this world, right? And my first niece, like, before she even arrived into this world, like, was the inspiration for me really trying to figure out how to break free from this toxicity, because I always wanted to be that fun, joyful, abundant aunt, you know what I mean? And here I am tied up in a love affair. And so Rachel knew this. And so when I would say something, she would say, is that what you would say to your niece? Is that what you would say to any child walking on this earth? And I'd be like, well, no, of course not. And she's like, okay, well, you're a child of God. I'm a child of God. Like, why would you say it to yourself? Right. And so that's a constant, like, just gentle reminder to me to this day if I start to, those thoughts, right. Or I start to get too hard on myself or start to condemn myself or, whatever it may be as a result of all this. It's like, but I would never say that to my niece. I would never say that to anyone else's child. They don't deserve this. You know what I mean? Like, if you're forgiven and free, you're forgiven and free. And so to walk in that grace and that mercy and live the abundant life God created us for.
And you perfectly summed up what self-compassion is, why it's hard for a lot of people to treat themselves the way they would treat the people they love.
Absolutely. That's a valid point.
You met this person through work, right? You were working together, or there's a close proximity?
Yeah, close proximity. I've always been in real estate for a living. But yeah, I had picked up a hobby in the horse industry, and so we met through that, and they had actually rented one of my facilities, and so that's how we met initially. But we did life together for about a year before the affair actually took place.
Okay. As the affair developed, we talk about how passionate it was. Take us through your mindset when that was going on, and like, because obviously you're living this secret life, but at the same time you were feeling alive, right?
Yeah, perhaps more alive than I had ever felt in my life. So in order to answer that question, Kelly, I feel like I need to back up just a couple years.
Sure.
So prior to that, I don't know if y'all have read the book or not, but I tell a story in the book is that I grew up in church, grew up with a strong foundation of faith, and I credit my parents for that. But there was a situation at a church that I had been at for about 20 years. Since I was like in middle school. And I was so heavily involved in serving and volunteering at this church that if you didn't know better, you probably would have thought I was on staff. Like, that's how well I knew the leaders of this church, and they knew me. And there was a situation that transpired that involved the closest friends we had ever had as a couple. That was about an 8-year friendship that unfolded. And unfortunately, there was a lot of church hurt that resulted. I lost the closest friends I'd ever had and lost the church I'd been at for 20 years as a result of that situation. And so I don't ever recall like getting angry at God or just, turning my back on God. It was more just going numb, because I'm like, if this is what your people are all about, I want nothing to do with this. You know what I mean? Like, this is the furthest thing from genuine and authentic, and I'm the most authentic person in the world. I also remember a situation in that church. It was a fairly large church of another affair. And I can remember, I think it's 1 Corinthians 10:12 that says, like, be careful what you judge, because you too will end up in the same situation. And I think looking back, nobody ever knew that I judged it, because I didn't externalize it, but internally I felt so like, how could he do that? How could she do that? You know what I mean? And so like, I felt like I was arrogant at the time. Like, I think I thought I've always been a strong, independent woman. And I think I was above reproach, like above temptation, beyond, and that would never happen to me. I would never cave to something like that. And so coming out of that church hurt and losing the closest friends we'd ever had as adults, I think I just kind of went numb to God and just was like, I don't want anything to do. That's what your people are about. Don't want anything to do with them. And so I was in this season of my life where Rachel's helped me now process now. Looking back, I think I can acknowledge that I was looking for a place to belong. Mm-hmm. I was looking for a place to fit again, and so when I crossed paths with this man and his wife, gosh, like I said, I was having the time of my life. I was in the horses with them. And this was like, I played basketball in middle school, high school, and it was like being in sports again, except I didn't have to do the running and all the exercise. It was like, but it was this idea of like this team concept, right? And winning together, and just the camaraderie that comes with that, and the joy and the excitement and energy and the adrenaline rush. And it takes all hands on deck. And I'm just having the time of my life. And I hadn't, here I had just lost my friends, my church 2 years prior. And so like, I felt like I was coming back to life. Like, I felt like this energy and this excitement again. Yeah. And so, and I share this in the book, but they were building a facility not far from me. And the first 6 months, I've worked in construction my whole life with flipping houses and such. And so the first 6 months, we were all working collectively together to finish their building and living quarters and everything. A lot of my guys were coming in to help with that. And then after that, it was like, his wife was more of not as much as hands-on as I've been. I was like tomboy growing up. I mean, I've spent more time in crawl spaces and attics than I probably have on the dirt. We grew up on a farm. And so she was more like, she was very supportive, but more like paperwork, back end work, you know what I mean? Whereas I was like hauling the horses, going to get the hay, handling the feed, like doing the heavy lifting. And of course, that's where identifying details have been changed, names have been changed. That's where Mav and I, we cross paths a lot. Is in that space, is in the hands-on work, right, in the grind. And so it became this like it just slowly evolved, and I don't even think we realized it, is that we were just spending a lot of unscheduled time together. We weren't sitting around on a couch. We were working, but we had a lot of unscheduled time together. And Rachel has helped me learn, or taught me now, that unscheduled time eventually results in intimacy, and that could be in a friendship, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be sexual, but like you're building intimacy. And then eventually it gets to this point of, then it happened. And first of all, obviously, with what I've shared with you about how I was raised, never in a million years would I have thought I would be the mistress, nor that it would be with somebody 30 years older than me. Like, it's not like, I don't think people go in. Now, granted, I think affairs take a lot of different faces and have a lot of different variables. I don't know that anybody goes into it like, oh, I want to go get that husband, or I want to go gift that wife. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't even on my radar. He was married. I was married. I mean, we were just working and I'd found this love for this newfound sport and just having the time of my life, it's not like I was looking for anybody, if that makes sense.
And he was probably in a place too, where he needed something, right? He was longing for some sort of connection with somebody else too. So,
and probably not even realizing, I mean, I can't speak for him, but probably not even consciously realizing it,
I've heard that from a lot of couples I work with, that where there has been an affair, you hear the term like, it snuck up on me. Like, I didn't even realize I was so in it until I was in it.
Sure. Michelle, is this why guys and girls can't be friends?
I disagree with that. I think guys and girls can't be friends. You know how I feel about that.
I was like, I usually hear this from church leadership, not from...
But yeah, I think Alicia's pointing out the crux of what we're talking about is you felt a loss of connection. You felt kind of untethered from this foundation you had. And you can't live in a void without any connection like that. So we need meaningful connections. And so finding that again, finding joy again, that's common to then put yourself full force into something that has awoken you.
Awakening, I think that was a word that came up as I was writing. It was like, I felt there was like an awakening when I met him and continued to do life with him that I hadn't experienced before, despite being in an 8-year marriage. You know what I'm saying? This
book must have been really cathartic for you then, I would imagine.
Yeah, I say in the book, it's the second hardest thing I've ever done. The first was and is living it. But writing it and reliving it was a tall order for sure.
There must be something really healing though about being honest, because when you've had that much secrecy for that long, it becomes the norm to kind of always be holding on, even physically, kind of the tension of a secret, and releasing that can make a huge difference, I think, in your well-being.
Yeah, I had been feeling, like I said, a strong call to write my story and share it. But it wasn't until it was actually ended up being my book coach, Ali Fallon, wrote a book called Write Your Story. And that book is just encouraging people to write their story. If you want to publish it, great. But if you don't want to publish it, maybe you leave it for your kids or your grandkids, or maybe it goes in the closet and you never look at it again. But she's inferring the healing that comes from writing.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, this was obviously for my first book, especially a very vulnerable subject to write about. I mean, it was hard. It was very emotional for me. I found that because I'm still in the same area, same place that I was during this. And so I found that I had to leave this area to write, to be able to disconnect. But it was a very emotional process. I imagine if I wrote about real estate, it'd be much easier, Yeah.
They talk about how therapeutic, Michelle, it is to journal, right? And to get your thoughts on paper. And that's something I need to do more of. But that's just, you're taking it one step further. You're actually saying, okay, I'm going to express myself. And then it takes a lot of courage to put that out there in the world, especially something as painful and as impactful as your story.
Yeah, I think it's the scariest thing I've ever done. Yeah. Because it's like I could have just kept this to myself, and a few people might have known that I shared with, but at large nobody would have known. Or you can step into the light and risk it all. And that's a scary thing to do. If it's required more courage than I knew I had or that existed, as you can imagine, just not knowing, I've been self-employed my whole life. Is this going to affect my career? Is this what relationships am I going to lose as a result, or will I, and just all the million questions as you can imagine. But at the end of the day, it was like, you know what, if this just helps one woman, like if this just saves one life and helps one woman break free, like it'll be worth it. And it already has. I mean, just upon the announcement in January, I was getting DMs like crazy. And then of course upon the book release. And so now I'm just on mission to like, I've been working on this project for 3 years. It took 3 years to do it. And it just released April 7th. And so now my team and I are just on mission to create exposure. So I'm so grateful to people like you for just having conversations and being willing to go there. Because the bottom line is that if the woman I used to be doesn't know about it, it does no good. Like we need to make sure that people know that there's a resource available to them.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me now why back then I was confused. Like, because you hear, extramarital affairs are rampant in our culture, right? We're rampant in our world. How is it that nobody has written about this? And how is it that nobody's sharing about this? And it's like, now I get it. Who wants to raise their hand and be like, I did that. I was the homewrecker. Like it's not something I'm proud of. I don't condone the behavior, but it doesn't help that nobody had. It didn't help me. And so it's like somebody's got to be willing to go first. And so I'm just, again, humbled and honored to blaze the trail and take this message to the world. And hopefully help a few people along the way.
And how has it been received by the people in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have the most supportive and loving family I could ask for. And, when I first shared my story with them, obviously you can imagine the whirlwind of emotion and not expecting that in a small town. And I've had people even from my town that have been like, I was shocked. I was shocked when I heard this or when I saw this, of course you were, because this isn't me, I was out of character in this. But so much grace, so much empathy, so much. I am blown away by the level of support locally. Didn't expect that being in a small town necessarily, and so, but not to be misleading. I mean, it's been hard too. I mean, it's a lot to process, especially for people in my family that knew these people, knew the real characters. The world at large doesn't know who these people are, but my family does, and so that's hard. Just a lot of processing, a lot of therapy.
Were any of them up in arms, like, "Let me at him"? Did you get anger on your behalf?
No, because I was also very, very adamant about, hey, it takes two to tango, and I chose this. I think because of the age difference. There was definitely some comments, some thoughts of he knew better, and I would respond with, I knew better too. I knew better too. I was in my late 20s. I knew right from wrong at that point. So,
as the man in this conversation, he said it takes two to tango. And I do, he has 50% of the responsibility here. In fact, I would argue maybe even a bit more. He had more at stake, right? He had kids. He was a little older. He's more mature. You're taking on a lot, Alicia. And as a man, I'm like, dude, what's up with you? He needs to take responsibility for his behavior, and his... I mean, I don't know the situation, but it seemed like he was really coming on to you pretty hard, or chasing it to a degree.
Oh yeah, there was no. There's a song it just came up yesterday again, and I had sent it to Rachel. I'm like, I sent this to him years ago, and it's called "The Villain," and it's like I can be the villain if that makes you sleep better at night. You know what I mean? But like I've been removed from any communication at all for about 2.5 years now. So that's how much of a gap there's been in any communication whatsoever. So I don't want to speak for him. I have no idea where he's at mentally, emotionally now. But he would say things like, but it was that passive aggressiveness, right? So he would say things like, I knew better. I knew what consistent and ongoing sex would do. I knew better. But when it would come, it was like if I was emotionally and mentally like, okay, feeling regulated and like, okay, we got to be adults. We just need to let go. Because he would always say, because of, you point out a valid point, Kelly, I bring this up, is he would always say, because of his age, like, I can't afford to lose what I've worked for my whole life.
Yeah, he had a lot of stake, right?
Yeah, he had a lot of stake with kids, family, grandkids, financials, and even though I would, offer like, hey, if this is what you want, then, I can float this, whatever. He was old school. So he was very much not open to, me being the support in order for him to leave. And so it always came back to, I can't afford to risk what I've worked my whole life for. But then it would be like, it's like if I was emotionally regulated, then he was riding a roller coaster. Like I can't, we can't let go. Or if he was emotionally regulated, then I'm riding the little, so it was just like, it was this comfortable toxic. And we knew the song and dance all too well. like, because I knew he was never leaving and he knew I was never leaving. You know what I mean? Because we had like went through this conversation so many times and been on this toxic, been in this toxic love affair for so long. And it took somebody from the outside calling me out.
Do you ever think about where you'd be now if you hadn't gone through this experience?
No, I have not considered where I'd be if I had not gone through the experience at all. I've considered like, oh my gosh, what if I had found this book when I hit rock bottom?
Mm-hmm.
2 years in instead of 4 years in, you know what I mean? And I didn't find it at 4 years in. It was just by the grace of God, through Annie that I the straw that broke the camel's back. But no, I hadn't really considered that. It's a great question. Maybe I'll ponder that now. That'll be my journal entry for tomorrow. And bringing up journals, Kelly, my first counselor. So as soon as I ended the affair, she challenged me to start journaling every single day. Yeah. And so when I wrote this book, I had almost 4 years, give or take, of daily journal entries to go back and reflect on. From the very beginning of counseling. And she really challenged me to start writing, starting it out, which was terrible for me. I feel like stating how I feel every single day. And I was so out of touch with feelings that she literally, like, I call it the pre-K emoticons, like smiley face, sad face, satin face. I would go into her room for counseling and she'd be like, well, how do you feel? I'm like, I don't know. I'm here. And she'd pull out this sheet that was like, which one looks like you? Like, oh my God. So eventually I graduated from the pre-K emoticons and went to like the feelings wheel. You guys ever seen those feelings wheels?
Yeah.
So now I'm actually able to journal without any resources. I can usually, so it's taken a few years. But I would write how I felt every day. And then I would also write 5 things I was grateful for. And I've never been on like I call it the positivity bullshit train, if you will. Like, and at the same time, what does it hurt to be grateful? Just to recognize that when you're in the depth of despair and when you're in extreme pain and nothing looks promising, like the sun's still shining. I still heard birds chirping this morning. You know what I mean? Like there's still a breeze, just to acknowledge those things. And so I think I'm like, what's it going to hurt? And so I would write down how I felt, 5 things I was grateful for each day. And since then, I've added some questions, just daily questions, like what do you want me to become? Who or what do you want me to release? What do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? And I'm a person of faith. And so that's my prayer every day. And I journal those entries. So journaling has become a life rhythm for me now, Kelly. So it's been very instrumental in my healing for sure.
I love that.
This may be a weird question, but I'm curious. You talked about the future. What percentage of you is hopeful that you're going to have that same passion and joy with another person again? And what % of you is scared that you won't find that same feeling?
That's a tough one, Michelle. And I think I'm in this. You guys know the teeter totters, like on the playground, like as kids. I feel like it's shifting fairly fast right now. So in full, just laying all the cards on the table for a long time. Even when I was writing the book, it was like, I'm scared to death that I'm never going to experience this again. Like I'm scared to death. I'm never going to experience this depth of a connection. This much excitement, because I think what I've learned and realized is that the extramarital affair, like the secrecy, even though it's like that's the toxic piece, that's also what like creates all the excitement and energy, because it's like more part ways, and it's like you're already like strategizing and thinking and looking forward and building the energy for the next opportunity, right? And so it's like the ecstasy of it is the secrecy. Right. And it's also like the destructive part of it. And so it's like, my gosh, but here's what I hold on to hope for is that we had an unbelievable mental, emotional, physical connection. We did not share a spiritual connection. And so for me, that's been my anchor is like, okay, but what if I meet somebody that we share all the connections? You know what I mean? Like how incredible would that be? And so that's been my piece of hope. I will tell you, just until about 2 weeks ago, I had not, and I wouldn't even call it a date. I have not dated it since this affair ended at all. And so I met a gentleman at a hotel, the hotel I was staying at, for a drink the other day, and that was it. Like, we walked away and there's no interest, but like I'm just now opening up to the idea of being active in this. I felt like it was a really weird, I think I could have sooner, but I felt like it was really weird. Like here I am writing about this man that like this awakening, trying to consider meeting other people. You know what I'm saying? And so I have not dated at all in 6 years. And so just now beginning to open up to that. And so as far as to answer your question directly about the percentages, I feel like there's about 30% of me that still questions will I ever have that level of connection. But that's reversed just in the last few months. Like if you had asked me that 6-8 months ago, I would have said 70% of me still questions that. I'm turning the curve. How's that?
And there may be setbacks to that, or it's not linear, it's cyclical in terms of how you're feeling about these things. So just riding those waves and taking them as they come is important.
Absolutely. And I am not excited about dating at all. I want to meet organically, and that seems foreign in our world today. So it's like, yes, I do long for for a connection and relationship again. But yeah, we got to navigate the online dating world now.
Well, one thing we had some guests last year that who said, I just told a couple of my close friends that I'm feeling ready. And, then I met through a mutual friend. So it was just putting it out there that I might be ready that helped, a more organic meeting happen.
Yeah.
I mean, just to quickly share my story, Alicia, I was divorced, went through a very painful divorce, and I was not looking to get to meet somebody else, dating a little bit, but she met me, and it was just like this amazing sort of connection, and really shook me, right, and woke me up out of my stupor or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, sometimes you find them, and sometimes they find you.
Yeah.
There's hope.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I feel like it's also important, like, for me, I have never been in a healthier place mentally, emotionally, and physically than I am right now.
Great.
I would actually say that I'm stronger having lived through this than I was before it began, right? And so always learning, always growing. I don't want to make it sound like I've arrived by any means, but like I was actually supposed to go on a breakfast date this morning, and he was already starting to like analyze things, and I'm like, oh, no worries. We just won't go. You know what I mean? Like there is no space for me at this point to like settle. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be that, and so I'm traveling a ton. That's been part of my healing journey, and I'm not willing to give that up, and so it's like, that's for some people to be there when you come home and make your dinner, and that's just not me. So, I think now I'm clearer than I've ever been on what I'm interested in and what I'm looking for. And I thought being a secret, being number 2 was the hardest thing I had ever done. I would say now that this healing journey is the hardest thing I've ever done. Like healing for me was harder than even living in the toxicity. But here's the thing. I know that can sound discouraging for the woman that's in it right now, torn between longing and loss. But here's the question I feel like you have to ask yourself, and I had to ask myself, is what future is there in this affair? Like, what future is there in whatever my secrecy is? Because the secret could have many different faces, right? For me, it was an affair. For other people, it could be something else. And then what is the future in healing? And like, that's hard because when I was at rock bottom, I didn't have a very promising view of the future, right? But I had the hope of the possibility. And there was no hope of a future in that affair. You know what I'm saying? And so I think, I don't know if you are you all familiar with Dr. Michael Slepian from Columbia University? He wrote a book called Secret Life of Secrets. And my speaking coach actually discovered it. And it was wild. He conducted a survey of over 50,000 people and discovered that on average, they held 13 secrets, good, bad, or indifferent. On average, held 13. 5 of which, though, they had never spoken out loud.
I believe that.
Yeah. And so that tells me that it's like, no matter what room we're standing in, there's somebody that's living in the bondage of secrecy. And this, like we already established, is the secret could take on many different faces, but the side effects are universal. Living under the burden of guilt and shame is universal. And so it's like when you can trade that guilt and shame in for forgiveness and freedom. You know what I mean? But I think society and even some churches at large are like, shh, we ain't talking about that. We're not going there. That's off limits. Sure. But again, what lives in the dark grows in the dark. So if we don't talk about it, how do we ever expect to heal from it? And I've been amazed at, and I'm sure you have experienced this, Michelle, in your work too. And even before the book came out, as I began to share my story one-on-one with other women.
Yep.
I mean, at one point I was tracking between 6 and 7 out of 10 women had either been the abandoned spouse or been the mistress. And we weren't even talking about other secrets, but like they had never shared until I shared. Like once you're vulnerable, like the reciprocation it skyrockets, or that's what I've experienced with the situation and sharing my story. And so it's been very perplexing for me. In that same survey study, he discovered that, and it was an anonymous survey is my understanding, but he discovered that 33% of Americans had committed infidelity. And of that 3% that had committed infidelity, a third of them had never told a soul.
Wow.
So here they are walking around living with it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is not, I mean, it's secrecy. And I'm on an uphill mountain, y'all, because this is like, I'm talking about secrets and I'm talking about affairs. It's something that everybody don't talk about. So, but it's like, no, I mean, we're going to keep charging forward because too many people are walking around under the burden of the guilt and shame from it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more to life than this, you know? And so just longing for people to live the abundant life we were designed to live and stepping into that.
Yeah. And I always say this, sharing is contagious. When people feel permission to be vulnerable and let out something they've been holding on to, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
I want to go back just to something that is sometimes a discrepancy. You're from a small town, you're from the Midwest, some kind of religions not always compatible with thinking therapy is the way to go. So I'm curious, what led you to open yourself to the idea of getting professional help?
Sure. Well, for me, I think I know, I've always been taught, and the Bible teaches to seek wise counsel, and there was this gap, there was this space. It's like, I need help. I'm going to die. It's one or the other. I've never been discouraged from counseling. I think growing up, at no fault of anybody, but growing up, I thought counseling was for people that had problems.
Right.
For some reason.
If you're
I
crazy.
didn't think
that's
I had problems until I had a really big problem. So I hadn't sought a lot of professional counsel. I mean, other than with my ex-husband, premarital counseling, until that was mostly through the church. But I've always been that person that's like, okay, you want to learn how to be married for 50 years? Go to find a couple that's happily married for 50 years, or you want to be successful in business? Go, so I've always been that person of like, always learning, always growing, just a sponge, soaking it all up, trying to learn from people that have done it better. In this situation, obviously, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody that had navigated this. I went searching in confidence for it, couldn't find it. And so here's what I would say now, Michelle, is like, I feel strongly that a bad counselor could be worse than no counselor.
I agree with that.
It's very important for people to find healthy and good counsel. And if you're not clicking with that person, I'm not saying like if they're telling you things that you don't want to hear, they're telling you to do things that you don't want to do, that's a whole different thing, right? But if you're not, if you don't feel like it's a good connection, then find somebody else. Don't quit, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in a man's world. I was, it was just me and my sister, and so I was the tomboy, and I've been flipping houses for 21 years. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of women jumping in crawl spaces with me, so I even in my work, like I've always been a guy's gal. My parents put me on an all boys t-ball team, right? I didn't want to pick flowers. I wanted to play ball, right? So it's like from day one. My counseling has helped me see that's because men are more tactical. They talk about weather and work and sports. Like women want to like connect on emotion. And as you already learned, like, I'm like, what are those? And who wants to talk about them? And so that's always been a really challenging thing for me. But I've always been super close with my sister. And so when I left that conference and heard that from Annie F. Downs, I actually told my sister first. I broke the bondage of secrecy with her. I don't regret that. She's my sister. But here's the thing is, and this is what I encourage people to do if they're in this situation, is find somebody that you never in a million years want to let down. Because I would never, ever go back on my word to her. You know what I mean? And so once I told her, I'm like, it was done once and for all. The physical affair. You know what I'm saying? But at that point, she was married, had babies, out of state. She didn't have the capacity to walk it out with me. I mean, this was going to be a really long, hard journey. The only way beyond is through it. It was going to get ugly, and it was ugly. And so that's finding Rachel, and I think it's so important too, especially in a situation like this, is to find a disinterested third party so that they're not tangled up in the emotion of the situation or in your emotion. Right. As you can imagine, anybody in my family, anybody in my community would have been wrapped up in the situation, which is not helpful. And so Rachel, being this interested third party, was able to guide me and help me navigate and lead me on this healing journey without that additional level of personal engagement emotionally, if that makes sense. So
absolutely.
Don't regret it. Highly, highly. I will be in therapy for the rest of my life. And I'm not in any major toxic situation right now. It's just because and especially as a single person, it's like, I think sometimes we just can't see the forest for the trees, and we just have these little blinders on at times. And it's like, no, I want to be in check all the time. I want to be accountable all the time. And thankfully, and this is the greatest thing that's came from this whole situation, is now I have, there was a gap, just to be clear. Rachel was also a pastor, counselor. I went to her grief counseling center, but she was a pastor as well. And so there was a gap, but now we are really close friends. And so she's one of my core people, and then my sister, and then I have another friend, Tanya. That's just, and so I've learned how to engage in female friendships. And like for the first time in my life, I have friends that I don't ever have to fear losing to a jealous spouse or an envious person. You know what I mean? Like I'll go to my grave with these 3 friendships, with these 3 connections. And that's priceless. That's priceless. It really is.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. Yeah.
And so I think it's important to find the person that you never want to let down, break the bondage of your secrecy with them, but then don't take for granted or don't assume that they're going to walk it out with you. Go find a professional to walk this out with you.
Well, I for one, Alicia, and thankful you have shared your secrets. I know, Michelle, this has been a really, just a great conversation, and I think really helpful for a lot of people who may or may not be going through something similar, right, in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can learn from your journey. So thank you for sharing such an incredible story.
You're welcome. Thank you for allowing me to.
Yeah. And for seeing a void and filling it with a really great resource. I mean, what more could we ask for?
Never in a million years thought it'd be my story. Never thought I would surely be telling the world, but here we are, and on mission. And I just have to believe. I think we all walk around like, oh, I mean, we just have these. It's the social media presence, right? It's the highlight reel. Right. But in reality, we know, especially from these studies, that everybody's struggling with something, and it's okay to be vulnerable and get some help. So I hope it will help everybody that wants it.
Yeah, and I think you're also showing a very relatable and approachable way of taking accountability, because if that piece were missing from your story, that would make it very different, I think. You're not self-flagellating, you're not, living in a pool of guilt, but you are saying, I had a part in this.
Healing, let's face it, healing begins with telling the truth.
Exactly.
And the truth means taking ownership, right? Mm-hmm. So,
but that's not an easy thing always. So I don't want to be glib about, how hard that piece is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alicia Barr is the author of More Than a Secret: How a Mistress Broke Free from Her Affair. Alicia, where can we find you?
Sure. For anyone that's looking for this resource, it's available everywhere books are sold. If you would like to connect with us, aliciabarr.com. There's an opt-in form there as well. And I typically send out an article every other week or so. And then, of course, on social media, Alicia Barr author on Instagram, Alicia Barr on Facebook, but all of that's on the website.
Michelle, now I'm thinking, do I have 5 secrets I'm holding in and that I haven't told anybody?
Yeah, that was an interesting stat.
Yeah, Alicia had some interesting stats about that. And I was counting them. I had 5 secrets. And what are they?
The good news is, if you're thinking about it, it means that you don't have 5 serious secrets at the forefront of your mind. So
yeah, and if I did, I couldn't tell you because they're secrets. So
well, I think the point of the show is to say you could. The sunlight disinfects. What's bringing these things out into the open? That's how you start healing.
Yeah, and it sounds like with Alicia, that's been a really her process. Like we talked about putting pen to paper, right, and really getting these thoughts out there, and then really helping her healing journey.
Yeah, when you think of people who put their stories out in which they have caused wreckage and have made choices that aren't ideal, like that does take a lot of courage.
A, writing it, B, releasing it. 2 very courageous acts.
Exactly.
And both incredibly difficult. I can't imagine. But like I said, I think cathartic for her in really sort of wrapping her head around what happened, her struggles, right? And then figuring out, okay, how do I move on from this? And I know she went through some really, really tough times.
Yeah, I also appreciate that she was honest about how great it was for a little while. I think you can't gloss over the fact that there was that it was passionate and wonderful and really fulfilled something for her. It doesn't serve anyone to ignore that piece.
No, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of this that she, it was very exciting too. And she had it fulfilled a lot in her. It fed her in many ways, I think, sexually, emotionally, physically.
But then when she talks about hitting rock bottom, we didn't get into this, but I'm sure there were signs, physical signs and emotional signs that things were no longer feeling that way. It takes a toll. It definitely takes a toll to hold a secret that large and just kind of have to coordinate your life according to the secret.
Yeah.
Logistically is difficult, and to not be able to have the full person that you're in love with, that's really hard. So I'm glad that we talked a little bit about grief and loss, and disconnection. And it's interesting because there's an identity who this is who I think I am. And then, something comes along in your life and you realize, oh crap, I'm capable of something that doesn't fit with who I thought I was. And that's hard to reconcile. And some people would shove that down or be in denial about it. But she got to a place where she really wanted to reflect on that,
Mm-hmm.
and move forward with that information.
Yeah. And in your practice, Michelle, do you have similar clients who have these secrets or issues or dealing with shame and dealing with infidelity? I mean, does this stuff come up in your practice?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of infidelity that I work with. And I'm trying to think of, I can't oversimplify it because there's so many layers to these situations. What I would say is kind of the hardest part, if there is a couple that's trying to rebuild after infidelity, of course, is the rebuilding of trust. What gets in the way most of that rebuilding is a lack of accountability. It's hard to feel like you can move forward with someone who has betrayed you if you don't feel like they sincerely feel bad about that. Because as the person who has betrayed, you want your partner to feel bad about what they did. I don't think I'm saying anything shocking there. And also, what leads to that. There's a lot of couples who haven't gotten to the point of infidelity yet, but they're in a space where they're not their person's person anymore.
Yep.
Or they're not the one cheering them on or feeling cheered on. And so there's kind of a breeding ground or a precursor to infidelity, obviously, that can happen in a relationship, a stage of the relationship that is kind of sowing the seeds of someone potentially stepping out. And so that's a whole other show. But
yeah, I can't imagine a very happily married couple or a couple who's a really super, super strong relationship, sexually, emotionally, mentally, physically, that you're not going to see necessarily infidelity in that kind of situation. I can't imagine.
You'd think that's the exception to the rule. I'd say that is kind of more rare to have that happen with those types of couples. It's not impossible. Overall, just the idea that Alicia's bringing to the table is, that she was inspired by not having anyone to turn to that could understand or not having the resource. And so she created one for other women or men going through this. So I love that. And it's tricky, right? Because I think a lot of people think that they have a very clear idea of whether, either a mistress is a villain or, there's nuance to it. It's tough because the mistress is the one who's likely going to get all of the hate. And you made a great point about trying to bring in the accountability of the other person.
Oh yeah, it takes two to tango, and certainly in her case, this guy, he was 30 years older. He knew exactly what he was doing, and certainly, I would argue should own it a bit more.
We have no idea what his mindset is, or what guilt he's carrying, or what have you. But clearly, she's the one who ended it. So.
Yeah, no, and I just mean was he a horny old guy? I don't know.
Okay, but we don't know. You're putting that on him. I think what happens is, like, when we're talking about stuff like infidelity, we all have these judgments that come up, whatever they are. And so one big takeaway for me from what Alicia was talking about was this idea of if you've been cheated on, you don't have to have compassion for a mistress. I'm not asking you to do that, but this idea of just generally having an open heart to other people's experiences.
Yeah, showing empathy. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So choosing compassion over judgment is a very difficult thing when these are like high stakes kind of moral scenarios. But it can't hurt us to try and practice, like, just instead of, since we don't know, stay in the mindset of just, well, we don't know, and we may never know, but we don't want to put on assumptions or judgments since we actually don't know.
Another great conversation, Michelle. I love it when we have guests on who really have a good story to tell. And I think in this case, Alicia's story is really compelling. And it'll be really helpful for people to hear from her point of view.
Exactly. I say this all the time. I love when we have guests who have a compelling story that they turn into a helpful and hopeful resource. She could just tell the story and then leave it at that. But, her hope is that someone out there who can relate to what she was going through, to save them kind of the pain and despair, or even the idea of ending their life, and try and help them through it and give them the guidance and the support that she didn't get.
Well, if you're out there and you're listening and you have a story and you want to share, or you want to reach out to us and just talk about your problems or issues or feelings, please reach out to us, theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com. Hit us up on Instagram. And we'd love to hear from you.
And even if you can't relate to this story, if you know someone who can, or, Alicia shared the statistic that most people probably have experienced this in some manner, please forward the link to them. Even if it's not something, a story or a show that resonates with you, sharing our link, you never know who in your life could benefit. If you're struggling with family, friends, or just life in general,
In a bad relationship and wondering what to do,
or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success,
then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating.
to be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com.
And be sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube.